continuing on with the introduction to financial planning, I said that there's different things you do at different points in your life, different life stages, as you will. Starting out, your early career, what are some of the things you should do? Start strong. When you're starting out, you're taking the first step to success is taking this course. Second is you taking some time to know the difference between needs and wants. You recognize the need for planning. You've seen what that compounding does. You can see that you can plan for retirement. It may seem a ways off, but you saw the difference between 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years. And that's money that's just, that compounding effect is huge. Major purchases, plan for them. Lifestyle purchases, you want to travel, cars, what was it? Well, what happens if you don't recognize the need? It's easy. If you don't recognize the need, you won't do it and you won't achieve the goals, you won't increase your wealth, you won't have financial stability, or be successful. So by recognizing the need is the first step, and you're well on your way of doing that. There's different things is that when you're in mid-career, you got to stay on track because you're going to be distracted by a lot of things, families, kids, purchases. And then as you're getting a little later in career, you're getting ready for retirement. You haven't retired yet, but you're getting ready to. So you may be changing how you work, how you spend your money, maybe increasing your savings. A lot of people are doing this today because they didn't save when they were your age. And then different life stages, living in retirement. You're going to be in retirement. You could be in retirement for 20, 30 years. So you have to prepare for that if you want to. I mean, you can work. You can work at Walmart and be a greeter when you're 82 or slipping hamburgers at McDonald's. But, you know, if you want more from life, then you have to plan it. So we'll get into it. Now let's get into some of the terminologies, if you will. The first thing is balance sheet. Remember when we looked at that slide, we said your financial plan, then there's your monitoring, budget control, and then there's your financial statements. Financial statements are a picture of a point in time. Your assets are in net worth. Assets less your liabilities gives you your total net worth. So it's a balance. Okay, everything has to balance. Now, when we look at that, what are assets? Well, there can be liquid assets, those that are cash or investments that can be converted into cash with a little or no loss in value. Okay, so these are liquid. They're ready to go right now. Then you have investments which you've acquired to earn a return. Okay, they're a little longer term. Some of them may be liquid, but it may not be. They may be liquid, but if you have money in a 401k or retirement plan, when you take it out, you may have to pay income taxes on that. There may be a penalty if you take it before age 59 and a half. So it's not as liquid because of those factors. Then you have real property, immovable property, which is land, house, buildings, for rent, for own. And there's personal property, those things that you can move. So real property is property including land or a house. It's immovable, you can't move it. Personal property is things that you can move around. But your greatest asset is not on your balance sheet. Maybe we should put it there, but it's the value of your ability to generate income in the future. So let's say, and this is, you can help determine what the value of your education is. So assume you don't go to college and you make $20,000 a year, and over 10 years, that's $200,000 worth of income. Okay, over 40 years, that's did I do that right? Yeah, 800,000. Now, let's say you make 40. You went to college and you got this extra degree which lets you make 40 instead of 20. Well, you just made double. So even at 40, that's $1.6 million. over 40 years. But now start playing with a little bit. Hopefully you want to make more. That is your greatest asset. We're going to talk more about that as we move forward. So those are the things you own when you money markets, and that gives you total liquid. Liabilities, the money you owe, can be classified by current or short term, such as utility bills that are due within 30 days, your cell phone bill, a repair bill, something that you got to pay within a year. And then there's longer term. They're due in a year or more. So if you have a mortgage, you may only have to pay a portion of that each year. Same thing with a car loan, your student loan. So if you have student loans today, okay, you don't have to pay them all at once. They're paid over time. So that's a long-term liability. So then you move on. Net worth is your total assets less your total liabilities. If your net worth is greater than zero, you're solvent. Your net worth less than zero, you're insolvent. Now with many of you, we have student loans. So you would put the loan on your books, but you have not put your future income. So I'd suggest you might want to do that in a very theoretical way. Let's take a look now. When you put it together on a balance sheet, this is what it looks like. Right now, if we had to do it, you probably wouldn't have too much. But you can see liquid assets are cash on hand, your pocket, your checking account, savings account, money markets, and that gives you total liquid. But here's your stocks, bonds, mutual funds, retirement funds, total investments, real property, personal property, you see it filled in, and their net assets are $218,000. But they have some unpaid bills, and they have a mortgage, and they have some loans. So as much as they have $218,000 in assets, they have $172,850 in liabilities. So their net worth is $45,000. So the net worth isn't the sum of your assets, it's your assets less your liabilities. Okay? Now, what can we learn? And some of these numbers have changed. The data was a little bit old, but it gives you a good picture. And in 2010 dollars, what's the net worth by age? So as you can see, if you're younger than 35, the average net worth is $3,662. Okay? 35 to 44, it goes up. And as you can see, once you're past 55, it levels out. But net worth is really held by this older group because it's a function of time. But when you look at some of these numbers, it's pretty low. I mean, if you think you did some of that calculating on the time value of money, and hopefully you would have more than $40,000 by the time you're 35. That's pretty low. And the average of net worth is only $71,635, which isn't that much. But that's the balance. Now, let's take a look at the income and expense statement. And that's a measure of financial performance over a given time period. It's really simple. What cash came in, what cash went out, what was your cash surplus that you saved, or deficit. You spent more than came in. What goes in? Cash goes in. Wages, salaries, bonuses, interest, dividends, tax refunds, gifts. Things we talked about, the wages and salaries, bonuses, and commissions. Interest and dividends are what you're going to earn on taxable accounts. So that's the cash in. The income and expense statement. It's a measure of financial performance over a given time. You have income, cash comes in, you got to look at it in cash. So cash comes in, cash goes out, what's left over is your cash surplus or deficit. So when we look at what is income, cash coming in, you got wages and salaries, your bonuses and commissions, interest and dividends on investments, tax refunds under certain circumstances, gifts, child support, what have you. That's the cash coming in. Cash going out flows such as your everyday expenses of food, shelter, and clothing, recreation, entertainment, autos, furniture, appliances, taxes. There's a lot of expenses that go out. Now, when we look at how does the American consumer spend, their money, you can see that the biggest thing, about a third, is housing. You should generally not spend more than a third of your income, cash coming in, for housing. But you can also see that transportation takes a big hunk out of it, as does food. But everybody spends a little bit differently based on what your life and your lifestyle is. If you live at home, your housing is going to be significantly less. So now, how do you take all this information? We've got the cash coming in, cash going out, and how do you do this? Well, basically, you start with your records, what information you have from all different sources for a period of time. And you say, what are the appropriate categories to put things into? Because you could keep everything, you could go into 100 different categories, but what's meaningful? 10, 15? I don't think you need to go more than 10 to 15. And basically, you put it down, piece of paper. You're going to find that I have a model for you. And that model will enable you to put in your income. It'll compute your taxes. We'll take a look at that in a moment or two. Then you take your income, you subtract your expenses, and that's your cash surplus or deficit. Hopefully, you have a cash surplus that you can put away into savings. Now, you have to say, well, what happens if I'm in this situation that my expenses exceed my revenue? Well, somehow, if you're planning this in advance, you can deal with it, okay? And by doing that, you can shift certain expenses around within months. Because sometimes your insurance bill may be payable every 3 months or 10 months out of the year. So you can move it around, or you can delay purchasing something until you have the cash. The other thing you can do is use savings or investments to cover that shortfall. The other thing you can do, though, and this is a scary part because a lot of people do this, is they use debt to cover that. They may use their credit card. They may not have enough cash to pay for everything. So what they do is they put it on their credit card, and they still have the deficit. Okay? And if you have that deficit, you're putting it on your credit card, which means you're going to have to pay it back in the future. And a lot of people miss that on that. So how do you use this information? Well, good question. You keep good records. You're organized. You can track your financial progress towards your goals. We can do a couple ratios. Ratios become important. One of the most important ratios that I think is, what's your saving ratio? What percentage of your after-tax income are you saving? So this is your cash surplus. This is important to be positive because it means you're preparing for the future. You clearly don't want it to be negative. So that's the savings ratio. The other is your debt service ratio. And that's really your ability to pay taxes, repay your loan obligations on a timely basis. And that's the total monthly loan payments divided by monthly gross income. And that we look to be, again, no more than 30%. Can people do more? Sure. I've seen a lot of people do more. But that means you're not necessarily spending on what you need to spend on. It makes life very uncomfortable. So now we say, okay, now we move on to budgets. Yes, there is a thing called budgets. And for you, this becomes very important because you're going to be starting out in the working world and you're going to have a lot more income coming in. But when you start putting this in context of a plan, you're going to find that it's very useful. So you start with your short-term financial goals. What are your goals? And then the budget can help you achieve them. If you achieve your shorter-term goals, your longer-term goals can be better achieved. A short-term goal may be able to simply be that your revenue covers all of your expenses and you have some ability to put money aside. So the process itself is you estimate your income, estimate expenses, and then you finalize your budget. Pretty straightforward. Now, what happens if you have a deficit? Well, you could liquidate savings and investments. You could borrow. The last two are the ones that you really need to focus on. You can cut expenses, okay? you can increase income. The first two are not the wisest moves. The last two are the ones that make budgeting really hard. When we look at household income in the U.S., we can see here that this is really 58% of U.S. households make less than $75,000. And then 38% make less than 50. So those that are over 75 is about 42%. So you do have this income here, this gap that you're seeing is there. So hopefully everybody wants to be up here, hopefully in these areas, but that's up to you. But what are some of the things obviously that drive personal income? Demographics and income. What's your age? What do you do? Marital status does, because sometimes you have two incomes in a household. Education. It's clearly shown that those with college degrees and advanced degrees earn significantly more over those who do not on a long-term basis. Where you live surprisingly determines your personal income. The career. What are you doing? Okay. When we look at this chart here, again, this is the average income at different educational levels. And you can see the gap here. And I want you to really take a look at that, because you're going to be right here is average income for that group based on educational achievement, which is over time, which includes the population. But look at those. Once you hit, just take a look at less than 9th grade. But even if you just get a high school graduate versus where you are with your bachelor's degree here is huge. And this comes up over time, so there's a lot of value there. Okay, what do we do next? We've had this discussion. What's the next step in this? Well, what do you do? Okay, what do you do next? What will life be like for you 5 years after graduation? Will you be a leader or a doer? How many hours a week will you work? Do you want to live in a big city? Do you want to travel for your job? Do you want to travel for pleasure? Do you want to move for your job? Do you see yourself in a big company or small company? What field would you like to be in? What else is important to me in the future? To some degree, you have to come up with what life will be like. Because once you know what life will be like, you can then have your financial plans focused on that. How does family figure into all this? Most important question, how much money do you want to make or need to make? How low would you go? Would you take a job paying 75? 50? 45? 40? 20? How much money do you want to make in 5 years? Do you want to have a portion of your money coming from variable income, which we talked previously? Just a little thing here to help you, because a lot of you folks have worked on an hourly basis, as to how to convert an hourly rate into an annual rate. Very simple. Double the hourly rate and add 3 zeros. So $10 an hour equals $20,000. $20 an hour equals 40, and so on. Now, I know what life will be like. Now what? Identify potential job types you may be interested in, aligning them with what you think life will be like. Now, in the next week or so, you will be doing this very same exercise, and you'll be reviewing other people's jobs. See how that fits with those questions that I talked about. Identify starting salaries. You've done that. Potential career paths. You've done that. Next question. How do you get the job? What are the skills? What experiences do you have to support those skills? What's your strategy for the job? So this is sort of stuff that we've already been working on, and this is taking you to another level. This is a freebie. This is not really focused as much on finance, but it's a freebie. So now we move into the starting point, and this is application project 2, defining your goals. By defining your goals, you have a better chance of achieving them. If you don't have a defined, measurable goal, you won't achieve them. I think first goal that we have as a collective society, long term, is retirement. But short term, it's up to you. Do you want to buy a car? Do you want to buy a house? Take a big trip? What have you? If you click here, we'll do this in a second, you can actually see how a savings calculator works. We also did this in our worksheet. Now, if you want to achieve financial goals, you actually need to put money away to achieve those goals. It won't just happen without you putting money away, which means that your cash in has to exceed your cash out. And that's what you need to focus on to be able to achieve those goals. If total income, though, equals expenses, you're treading water and you won't achieve your goals. If total expenses exceeds revenue, you're actually going backwards to them. Then you want to create a monthly budget. Creating and sticking to a budget is an important step to getting your financial health in order and building the wealth. Okay, because you got to have this goal. You got to be able to measure towards it. Okay, and the budget helps you understand where money is coming in from and where it's going, and making sure that you're not spending more than you make or more than you think. Sometimes you don't realize what you spend money on until you put it on a piece of paper. I know I do that, and I do keep a budget, and I do measure where I'm going, but I'm sometimes surprised by how much I spend and where it is. Once you have it, you can start developing that plan. When you know how you spend your money, you can start saving more each month, which is going to help you plan. People tend to adapt their spending to their income. So if $100 comes in, we tend to spend it. Okay? And people don't always consider their financial goals. So by you taking this course, you understand now, hopefully, very straightforward, is if you want to achieve your financial goals, you need to determine how you're going to spend your income and realize it's an equation that income and expenses are related. So they need to either balance out so that you can have a balanced budget, or that you can generate the surplus, which helps you hit those goals. A budget can help you determine whether you should save more. Are you working towards those goals? And next thing to talk about is a very important thing, is to establish an emergency fund. That emergency fund can provide you with money to fall back on in case you lose your job, have a medical emergency. With a little discipline, you can set money aside. You should have between 3 and 6 months worth of your living expenses. Okay, because if you had lost your job, you still have those expenses. They don't go away. If you get sick and you can't work, you still need to have those expenses. You can't rely on the small amount of unemployment. So it's not that much. It may take a few years to fund this, but you want to pay yourself first. Okay? And this comes back to when you should pay your student loan. Okay? Your student loan can be out there for a long period of time. So you want to make sure you pay the minimum that you can on that and use the funds to build that emergency fund. So you don't want to pay back that loan any faster than required until you've gotten yourself well positioned by having an emergency fund. You're fully funding your retirement plans. That's what becomes important. So you need to have that emergency fund. If you follow this link, it'll give you additional information that will help you understand it. So what we're going to do now is I want you to think about everything here, and now we're going to take this step and create a budget. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to read and to listen to the instructions for application project 2.